The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Round 5, at 24 Hours of Spa-Francorchamps is brought to you in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, Leap Gaming, Global Flix, Film Volt, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
As we are, well, I was going to say as we are about to, but we have already jumped on in to the 2 hours of Thursday practice.
We have indeed. Well, good morning everyone, good afternoon, as Yusuf said, good evening everyone, wherever you're watching in the world. It's great to have you along for this practice session for the upcoming endurance race at Spa-Francorchamps. And what a circuit, just over 7 kilometres located in the heart of the Ardennes Forest, which if you're no stranger to motorsport, you'll soon realise that that means anything could happen with the weather. Should be a fantastic watch for the entire event. And I'm looking forward to jumping straight into this practice session to see what's going on and seeing what happens out there today.
I don't know what it is, Kieran, but every time, we talk about the great tracks, there's something about unpredictable weather. We have it at Spa, we have it at Nürburgring, even at Suzuka, and of course any track in the UK as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you couldn't drop a unpredictable weather statement without dropping a track in the United Kingdom. No way. But there's something about what happens in the Ardennes Forest just makes it localised, really. You can have places where it's just a drizzle at one part of the second, be completely bone dry at the other. I've had the pleasure and the luxury of actually being at Spa for the F1 racing back in 2013. Seems like a while ago now. And I have to reiterate, when you're driving these cars and when you're watching on, you don't actually realise how much undulation there is at Spa-Francorchamps. It is insane. It really is.
It's almost like a consistent feature that I feel was brought up in like pretty much every single F1 broadcast every year. Every time we would, or every time the season would arrive at Spa, there would be a little piece in the pre-show about how steep Eau Rouge actually is, and I don't know, either they put a skateboard or something, and then you just watch it absolutely fly down Eau Rouge. Of course, this is going in the other direction, but a lot of undulations, very steep in certain parts of the track, and a driver and fan favourite in all regards, really.
Oh, absolutely. It's, as we're commentating in the box, it's certainly going to be one of our favourites across the entire endurance here this weekend. And whether it's practice, whether it's qualifying, whether it is the entire race itself, I can absolutely guarantee there's going to be some sort of action happening out on track. I mean, it's a long track, 7 kilometres, just over 7 kilometres and 4 metres if you want to be very precise. And one thing we were talking about before we came to air, Yusuf, is the penalties here. Now,
yes,
when it comes to drive-through penalties at Spa-Francorchamps, we're using the combined pit lane here, which means you enter the pit lane at the final chicane, but you don't come out of the pit lane until you're past Blanchimont, not Blanchimont,
Radion.
Radion, that's the one I meant. You don't emerge from the pit lane until then, and even then, you are at the speed limiter the entire way through. So you really want to be avoiding any of those track limit penalties, because a drive-through here will cost you so much time.
And it's one of the good things, and simultaneously the bad things about Spa. The fact is you've got that second, length to the pit lane. When we talk about something like F1, that's where the support teams would usually be stationed. You'd have your Formula 2, Formula 3 cars parked over there. But when we're doing GT racing, we have a lot of teams racing, so being able to use a combined pits is a fantastic thing, because it means no one is sharing their pit box. But if you are then doing a pit lane, if you're doing a pit stop, or if you're serving a drive-through, anything, it means you've got to be going slower for longer, because you can't be going full blast past essentially working pit lanes, not in the real life anyway.
Not in real life, no, of course not. But it's great to see, the capacity really being reached here. Hopefully, we'll see more and more. I mean, if anything was to go by this practice session, I mean, my first one here at this wonderful establishment was back in Monza, and that just showed us how crazy it could be, because those practice sessions you're allowed to run. I'm not sure if it's the same this time around because it's a bigger grid, but you were allowed to run as a team, but you were allowed your individual cars out there, so you could be all out there at the same time racing each other. And I've just been confirmed in my ear that that's exactly the same ruling here in tonight's practice session. So you might see multiples of the same car, but that's just all the drivers getting their practice in at the same time, and that proved some really dramatic stuff in Monza.
Yeah, well, I'm looking over at our timing screen now. I noticed that there are a couple of the Pro Sim cars, the 007 LMP2s, that are out on track as things currently stand. Got a couple of the DEAC hackers on circuit, again LMP2 class, and in the GT3 class, we've got a couple of the 41 Mugen Sim Racing's Zol Pribek and Molnar Attila out on a circuit. But I think before we really jump on into everything, it's probably a good opportunity to remind everyone how the championship standings do look coming on into the 5th and the penultimate round of the season. Just a reminder to everyone that the final round in Le Mans in October will have a double point. It's going to be live held in Denmark, all LAN as well, from what I have been told. So it kind of makes sense to, put a little bit extra on the line when we get to that round. So our top class, the DPI class, which joined the circus, let's say, in the previous round at the Nürburgring, is being led by Satellite Racing. It's a 1-2 for Satellite Racing, as they were able to finish first and second in the opening round of the class. Viaducton took third place on 15 points. But that's really it for the DPI class. Kieran, what's going on in the LMP2 class?
The LMP2 class, I'm very glad you've asked me, because you've absolutely caught me off guard. But
oh, no.
You absolutely have. I'm having a couple of issues here with my live timing, unfortunately, so I was focusing on that whilst you were running through the championship standings. So sorry to have you've caught me off guard there.
Well, I'll jump on in then with the LMP2, and then I'll let you jump back on in for the GT classes. because in the LMP2, Varga Sim Racing were no longer able to continue their dominance. They'd won the first 3 rounds, picked up pole in all 3 rounds as well, but in round 4 at the Nürburgring, they had some issues, a couple of incidents, and arguably they were still the faster car, but they were only able to take second. And what this means is that they only lead by 40 points over Mugen Sim Racing, who are a further 13 points ahead of Deuces Motorsport. Deuces only able to pick up P4 last time round and unable to capitalize on the misfortune that struck Varga. Then in P4, you've got Ramada Motorsport. They're further 3 points down behind Deuces. DAC Hackers in 5th after only being able to pick up 4 points at the Nürburgring. DSG Motorsport, the 334 car, picking up no points at all. They're now, well, lingering behind on 29 points. The 777 DSR Nightmare car, they had a few issues as well, but they were able to recover rather well to take P5 at 28 points. They're further 10 points ahead of Team Ebrit. Then you've got DSR Dream Team, B32 Racing, ProSim, and Abstinio Force Polania on 6 points, rounding out the LMP2 class.
Yes, and now I'm absolutely on the same page as you, Yusuf, so now I can actually see the championship standings for myself. Wanted to be sure before I jumped in there, but it's looking pretty close in the GTE classes. Musto GD Esports on 73 points at the top of the standings. Then it's WOSR iZone Performance, only 4 points back. It's been pretty close between them. They have had a lot of 25 points shared between them. Musto getting 25 points at Silverstone and at the Nürburgring. Meanwhile, WOSR grabbing the 25 points at Sebring. Both had a decent round in Indianapolis, and that's really where the differences lie. A good performance from WOSR at the Nürburgring, not so much for Musto when they headed to Sebring. They only scored the 6 points there that time around, but they did complete the race, which was added a bonus onto that as well. So they are sitting just 4 points behind. Then it's DIS Sim Racing Lab, who have been pretty consistent throughout the entire season. 15 points in Indianapolis, 15 points at Silverstone, then 10 points of Sebring, and as well as the Nürburgring. So they're now on 54 points and now rounding off the top 3 in the standings. Then the other Musto GD Esports, the sister team down there in the 54, I should say, on 42 points. They're only a point ahead of Volante Racing in the 66, rounding off the top 5 in the championship. And top 5 covered by 32 points as we head into the final 2 rounds.
And GTE class looking very close. We kind of expected it to be. It's the biggest class that we have this season in the Endurance E-Racing World Championship. And, well, Musto are leading. They look strong as well, barring that one poor performance in Sebring that they'll argue was down to the BOP that affected their BMW. So something like that. Classic racing and driver excuses, if you ask me. But in the GT3 class, there have been less excuses being made. Unison Racing lead the championship on 88 points, having taken second place last time out at the Nürburgring. Mugen Sim Racing in second. They're further 6 points behind, having won in Nürburgring and closing the gap to Unison. Third is One Move Esports. They are 25 points behind Unison and 19 points behind Mugen Sim Racing. They have won 1 round so far this year. And then in P4, you've got Glam Racing, the 404 car. They're sitting on 55 points, a further 8 points behind One Move. Then you've got the Danish Racing League and DIS Sim Racing in P5 and P6. Not quite as close as that GTE class, but still very close nonetheless at the top end, just 6 points separating those top 2 teams.
Yeah, and I have to say, at the moment, it's one of the DEAC Hackers cars. The number 95 of Roland Schutz is topping the tables in this practice session so far with a 2 minutes .117. The fastest class we have so far is the LMP2s. We haven't had a hypercar in this practice session yet, but I'm, well, maybe sure that we should get some later on down the line. And then it's one of the 007s, one of the ProSim cars in second place at the hands of Hove there. Currently going around 2 minutes and .167, so mighty close at the top of the timing standings. In fact, it's about half a tenth of a second is the difference between the two of them, with both of them trading purple lap times and best sector times going throughout the session. So looking like it's going to be pretty close between some of the best drivers out of DAC Hackers and out of ProSim, so that's always an encouraging sign. We've got a handful of GTE cars as well. Leading that one is the 54 of the Musto GT esports team. Daniele Primavera at the wheel of that car. Then it's the DIS SR Sim Racing Lab car, the number 45. Not sure who that was at the hands of, unfortunately, but we can narrow it down to 1 out of 3, rounding off that. And then we have the GT3 class. It's the Mugen Sim Racing number 41, as driven by Pribek Jolt with a 2:17.002.
And I do wonder at this stage, because the teams have had so long to practice, to get their setups ready, just to mentally prepare for the round, for qualifying. Do you think teams change? And do you think they, change who they want to do qualifying based on how this practice goes? Or do you think they already know, okay, we want driver X to be at the wheel, we know what he can do in qualifying? Or do they then, get around to practice and say, maybe he's not quite performing as we thought, switch it around for Friday?
Well, I think that's an interesting, isn't it? Because every driver has their favourite tracks, and every driver has a track they're not so, it's their weakest track, and they'll willfully admit it's their weakest track. And I think at that point you're going to have to sort of figure out and work out who's got that qualifying pace, who's got that 1 lap pace to put the car on pole position. They might not necessarily be the driver that then goes on to start the race, but you at least want to have an idea of which drivers you want at certain points in the race. I mean, it harks back to Le Mans, when in the Toyota Gazoo team they're very lucky to have Kamui Kobayashi when they race at Le Mans. He is absolutely stunning around the Circuit de la Sarre, so they know to put him in the car for qualifying, and they've known that for years. But when you've got sim teams like this, maybe there'll be driver transfers, there'll be drivers coming in, maybe drivers leaving for other teams. It's quite a chop and change world when it comes to team sim racing. So you might not necessarily know heading into the weekend who will be in the car to set, or at least attempt to set, the fastest lap that the car's capable of. But as you say, they've got the time there, and they've got this official practice session to sort of work out, well, who's going to be in the car on the final lap of qualifying.
And as you said, they've got time here in practice to determine it, but maybe more importantly, so they've also got time in qualifying, 2 hours in each qualifying session. For those of you who are new to GTR 24H and unsure of how the system works, we've got a 2-hour session of practice now, and then tomorrow evening we will have 2-hour sessions of qualifying. We'll take a combined qualifying time from each team, which will then determine the grid order heading into the race on Saturday. 24-hour race, which will be starting at 2 p.m. European time, or 2 p.m. local time, because we are racing in Belgium, in Europe. But as I mentioned, you've got those 2-hour qualifying sessions, 2-hour qualifying sessions. There's plenty of time, isn't there, for a team to put multiple drivers out onto the circuit and even see in that session alone how things are looking. The only time that isn't the case is when you know that there is rain on the radar, and, well, either rain going to be approaching very early on in the session, so you want to get your hot lap in as quickly as you can, or it raining from the start of the session pretty much until the end, and then you might have a little dry spell where, again, you've got a very small window where you want your fastest driver out on circuit to make those minuscule differences in grip count.
And those minuscule differences are the key to endurance racing. A tenth of a second gained over 1 lap. Well, that's a lap round here. Let's just round it up, let's say, to 2 minutes 10 or whatever. But you put that over a tenth of a second per lap over the next 24 hours, and it's going to become a pretty sizable gap by the end of the race. So every little bit of pace that you can get out of the car, that you can get out of the driver, will more than add up in the long run. And it's just trying to fine tweak the setups as well, using this official practice session, and to maybe run. This is a luxury that many teams, when it comes to motorsport endurance racing, don't have the opportunity to have separate cars and have each and every driver have their own car to then go out there and test for themselves. It can be a very crowded track. But motorsport teams don't have that luxury. Sim racing teams do. And that does open up the opportunity for each and every driver to have a fair turn, to make sure that they're tuned in and dialed into the track heading up towards the weekend. But you might find that it's a very, very crowded circuit, because we've got 3, 4, maybe even up to 6 drivers in some teams, on the track at the same time. It's a lot of people out on the track at any one time.
And I'm really glad you bring up this point as well, because it's something that we as commentators and viewers tend to gloss over and forget, and it's the reason why I think sim racing is so much closer than what you see in real life racing, whether that's in Formula One, whether that's in, well, the EEWC counterpart, which would be, the World Endurance Championship. It's the fact that the drivers, the teams can go out whenever they want, Early night off work, I'll hop onto the sim rig, do some laps around the Nürburgring. You can't do that, in real life. So it means that the drivers are able to get so much more time on the track, and you can fine-tune that setup so much more. If you ask, I think, any, top-level sim team, sim driver, how many hours they put in towards perfecting a setup for a track, I wouldn't even be surprised if it was entering into triple digits, whereas when you look towards the IRL events like the World Endurance Championship or any racing circus for that matter, you've got, 5 hours at the most of practice, really. So the amount that you can fine-tune your setup is so much more limited, and as a result, the field can just get so much closer in sim racing.
They really, really can, and it opens up that opportunity to have that. As you rightfully said, you can hop onto the sim rig whenever you want, whenever you fancy, to put some laps in and have that luxury there. But, are you running the same setup as everybody else? When it comes to the car, you're going to be running what the entire team is running. Now, is that setup going to be hugely changed from someone before you? Can you make those tweaks in time for it to be a shorter or at least a good enough pit stop so that you can get away with making those changes? It's all those subtle little things that, yes, you can hop on the rig at any single time you wanted to, but at the same time, you've got to be running a very similar setup to what everybody else is running on the car. Otherwise, the laps you put in will not count for a lot.
And as you mentioned slightly earlier on as well, if you gain 1 or 2 tenths a lap here at Spa over 24 hours, that's going to be a huge amount. But it's also important to remember, if you're taking risks to get that 1/10 a lap, if you then make a mistake, and I'm not saying, you crash and you're out of the race, but if you just make a little mistake, that could be half a second gone, which is those 10 1/10. So even if you'd been gaining a tenth for 10 laps and then you make that one little mistake, it's all gone. It's all down the drain that quickly. And it's important that the rest of your team are able to use your setup. And there's this fine balance that the drivers and teams have to decide on, getting that raw pace for a little bit of extra instability on the car, making sure that all of the drivers are comfortable with whatever kind of instability has been created by whatever setup changes were made.
Yeah, it's a very good point you raised there, making sure that every driver's comfortable with whatever they're going to be driving this weekend is going to be critical to making sure the team has that success. And when you say that, one mistake can cost a lot, in the grand scheme of things, we talk about how finding that extra tenth of a second per lap over 24 hours is going to add up to a lot. So if you make a mistake and you lose 3 seconds, it's important not to be too downbeat about it, because 3 seconds over an entire 24-hour endurance by the end of the race is going to be pretty negligible. You just got to make sure you make the fewest mistakes possible. And if you do make a mistake, which everybody does, everyone will over their stint, however long it will be, they will make mistakes, and that will become, not so much a bad thing. It will be what it will be. Your drivers will make mistakes. It's just making sure you make the fewest amount and costing you the least amount of time possible. And making sure you don't put it into the wall is also a very good objective.
And whenever we have these endurance races, it kind of throws me back to some of the endurance races that I've been able to do, not on sim racing, sadly, but IRL karting 24-hour races. And one of the biggest difference between the karting races and these races is the fact that we've got no radio, we've got no intercom, nothing like that. We could have it, but we're too poor to be able to buy intercoms and put in our helmets. So we're out there racing blind. You jump in the car at the start of the stint. You don't even know when your stint has ended. You're kind of frantically glancing over to the pit wall every lap to see if your team are frantically waving at you to pull you in because you're about to run out of fuel. But you'll jump out, and let's say you're in 23rd or something. All you know is you've just got your head down. You might be overtaking people, but sometimes you don't even know who you're battling with. You're just trying to just do your absolute best. You'll come into the pits, you'll find out maybe you gain 10 positions and think, how have I gained 2 laps to the guy ahead over 90 minutes? Or maybe you lose 5 or 6 positions. And you can gain so much time, and it's a combination of other drivers making mistakes, maybe running slightly different strategies, going slightly shorter on their pit stops. Tires could be more worn out, technical difficulties for the other teams, and those technical difficulties still the same even here in sim racing. We've seen it time and time again. Pretty much every single EEWC round there seems to be some kind of disaster striking a team in the final hour of the race.
Yes, and it's normally the final hour of the race where you start to actually piece together, well, what position are we actually battling for? I'm sure, Yusuf, you've been in that scenario where you think you've got the upper hand on a team who's got the strategy, or you think, yeah, this strategy is really working well, and you get to the last hour and you think, well, actually, we're about 2 laps down on where we thought we were going to be. So it's working that out as well, and not trying to be too... it's a long race, and yes, if you're ahead at hour 2, if you're in the lead at hour 3, there's still a lot that can happen over the remaining race. So it's important not to get too ahead of yourself too early.
And I still remember last year in the Endurance E-Racing World Championship, my co-commentator Alex Skinner, he had a team that was participating, and what happened to that team I think is a good lesson for any team looking to race in an endurance race. So I went to sleep at about midnight, or maybe it was 1 a.m. So I jumped to sleep. I then woke up at about 7 to jump back on broadcast for the final few hours. As I got up, and this happens every single time, you'll go to sleep, whether that's as a driver, team owner, commentator, whatever it is, you'll go to sleep with a picture of how the standings are, how the race is progressing, and then when you wake up, someone has literally picked up a can of red paint and thrown it onto your picture, and you've got to work out what on earth happened. So in this particular instance last year, Alex Skinner's team they retired from the race. They had an incident, they lost a few laps, they had dropped down to, I think there were 7 laps off the leader at that point, and they retired the race. Come the end of the race, if they hadn't had another technical difficulty, they would have actually won, because of all of the other issues that affected the other cars, whether that was driver error, whether that was a car error, collision between 2 drivers. And in a 24-hour race, that is especially the case, especially compared to the 12-hour races we've had up until this point. Double the length, double the time for other teams to have issues.
Yes, and we even saw that in motor racing. We've seen it happen to Toyota years ago. We even saw it at the last Le Mans that's just gone through for the LMP2 class. Endurance racing can break hearts. It will always have that scenario. It can always, make you feel like everything's got to you, but that's part of the reason why we love it as well, is that it can be so cruel. It can be so cruel as to let the car keep going for 23 hours and 59 minutes, but if it's not running at the final minute, you get nothing.
And I think it was earlier, well, I think it was 1 week ago, we had the Le Mans endurance race, and wasn't it Kubica who was going to win it until the end, where I think something happened. I'm not sure what it was, but I know my Twitter completely exploded with RIP Kubica's after he had some kind of technical issue with the car.
Yes, that's exactly what I was alluding to earlier on, is the fact that Robert Kubica was about to win the LMP2 class, and he was about to spark a sensation there. However, as I said, the car didn't want to run for the final minute of the entire 24-hour race, and so therefore, that's that. When you get into the last hour of a motorsport endurance, normally there's no more recoveries. They will stop recoveries for the rest of the race. So if you get stuck into the gravel trap, or if you find yourself into the wall, that's it. Your race is done. So it's a cruel way of being eliminated from the race, unfortunately, but I think that's the beauty of the beast sometimes of endurance racing. It can taketh away when it really wants to.
You live and die by the blade, as I think the term goes, and sadly for Robert Kubica, he died by the blade. And we'll see whether over this weekend anyone else will either be fortunate from the blade or will be suffering severe wounds. I'm looking over at the standings at the moment. Fastest time currently for Roland Zux, who's put in a 2:01. The Pro Sim car just behind him also on a 2:01 as well. So you'll have to think, as the session progresses, we'll be getting a few drivers eking into the 1 minutes.
Yeah, it's so close, isn't it? Some of these LMP2 cars are just knocking on the door of a sub 2-minute lap time. So I think we're going to see it sooner rather than later. So yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed over the next hour and a half that we can see someone break the 2-minute barrier and finally get a 1:59. I will say it right now, Yusuf, we will see it. I'm not going to say, well, we might see it, or we could do, it's 50-50. No, we will see it. We will see it. I'm putting the marker down now. Put it down here, 30 minutes into this practice session. Put the marker down, and if I'm wrong, so be it.
And on that bombshell, we're going to be heading on into a commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back momentarily as the heavens will open, and Kieran will have a very questioning look on his face.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Round 5, that 24 hours of Spa-Francorchamps is brought to you in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, Leap Gaming, Global Flix, Film Volt, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
Welcome back, folks, as we are jumping on into the second half hour of our practice. Then we come back to you with some absolutely incredible news. I can barely believe it. Kieran McGinley, folks, got his prediction right. We are into the 1 minute.
Never doubt me again, Yusuf. Never ever doubt me again. You know, I mean, we were told when we went to a commercial break it would be funny if that didn't happen, because apparently there is rain on the way. But the second that was said, 2 minutes broken. There you go. Never ever doubt me again. Unless
there you have it.
Yeah, unless
you know
should.
What the funny thing is for me, Kieran, on my timing page, it hasn't even updated for me yet. It's still stuck on 2 minutes, point 1.
Well, I can happily say, looking at the leaderboards in at least at the practice session, it is a 59.989, I do believe, which I'm hoping.
That's barely a 1 minute.
Yeah, I don't know because now I'm doubting myself because that lap time's not there anymore.
It's disappeared. It must have been a
59
validated lap.
Well, it must have been, but it was a 59.989, and I will hold everything to that. So that's what I will say about it.
It's an incredibly quick lap, and I think the only way he managed it, and I think this is kind of proven by the fact that it's been removed from the leaderboard, is if he cut through the final chicane, he just ignored it and just drove straight through. I think that's the only way it's possible to do a 1 minute at Spa.
Well, I don't know, because cutting the final chicane takes some doing because you've got tyre barriers all the way across. I thought that was a bit impossible to cut the chicane as much as that, but hey ho, what do I know? But I definitely did see a 59 with my own eyes, so I'm going to be not having any forfeit whatsoever based on that alone. But at the moment, it's the number 95, I believe, is at the top of the standings in Roland's shoes for DEAC Hackers. Hasn't gone quicker, I don't think, than the lap time he set originally when we first joined into the coverage for the practice session. It's about a 2 minutes point 117, but of course we may have seen that 159. The driver may have left the server, the team may have left the server, etc, etc. So I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt, but I'm still claiming it as a victory, and you can't take it away from me.
No, I can't. I mean, maybe Kieran, they set the 159, then they heard you bragging about it, and they thought, right, quick, out of the session, guys. Let's make the commentators question their sanity.
It must be that they can hear us. They know what's going on. So that you know what, Yusuf? That's the best theory I've heard so far. I'm taking it.
I don't know if production knows. Does anyone know who set the lap? Because I presumed it was Roland Sooks, because I saw it on one of my timing screens.
It was Hove. It was the 007 Pro Sim.
Hove.
Yes.
Wait, Sebastian? Yeah.
But that's. I've got my facts straight, and I've been told he's left the servers. That's probably why the time isn't there anymore.
Well,
yeah, I've got away with it. It's fine.
I should have added to the whole thing, a time that remains until the end of the session.
Right, yeah, okay. Then I would have been absolutely on my on my way out, because that would never happen. We are expecting some rain. We're told we're expecting some rain, and the great thing about when we head to GTR 24 hours is we use live weather. So whatever the weather is at Spa-Francorchamps right now is the weather the drivers are experiencing right now. It's a fantastic system, but it is very, very accurate. I mean, my first volley with it was at Monza last month, and the weather had changed so much that it was almost like the clouds had parted over the circuit itself and didn't fall until the race. We were predicted rain for the practice session. We were predicted heavy rain for qualifying. Both of those sessions, the rain never came. It only came towards the end of the race at Monza last time out. That's when it decided to chuck almighty water down onto the track. So we are expecting rain towards the end of this practice session, maybe within the last 20 minutes. By then, we'll see some quicker times, I'm sure, because the track until then will just keep on improving and improving, with more and more rubber being laid down onto the circuit.
And it's really good that the likes of R Factor 2 and I believe CET Official is going to have the option of being able to implement live weather into the system. I know once in one of the F1 leagues that I was commentated on, we tried to get live weather in, and what we'd do is 2 hours before the race we'd pull up the live weather of the track and then announce what the weather would be over the course of the race, which was quite interesting for drivers, because they would try to practice for the entire week for a certain whatever weather forecast was forecasted at the time, and then it just changed randomly right at the end, and all of their practice had gone to waste. So it was one of the most enjoyable experiences for me as a commentator, seeing drivers having no idea how to deal with dry or wet conditions depending on what they had practiced for.
Oh, absolutely. I think I've just come across, this is a replay of Varconyi coming up towards Les Combes. This caused a yellow flag earlier on, coming up towards Les Combes and taking the first curb, and the back end just seems to drop on him there. He can't slow the car down and hits the wall on the right hand side. So he's now brought that car back to the pit lane. And something we were discussing earlier on in Monza was that the fact that these practice sessions are a great way of, pushing the car to its limit, because if you put the car into the wall, you can easily press the escape button, head back to the pit lane, and you can have a brand new car ready for just you. That completely goes away in qualifying. In the practice session, they can use that and many times as they feel necessary.
It reminds me back to, again, karting in the past, where our team captain, so this is back when we were karting in two-stroke. So for people who have done two-stroke karting before, you get two types of these two-stroke karts. You either get direct drive or you get standard karts. And what happens with direct drive karts is you've got no clutch on them. So if you spin, if you bring the kart to a stop, the kart will stall. And you can't get it going again until literally a pusher cart, it goes around in a slow cart. It takes ages to come up to you, pushes you and gets you going. So he'd always say, if you want to spin, make sure to do it in the practice, because you can spin as many times as you want trying to learn the limits. But if you spin once in the race, it's your race over. And for a half-an-hour sprint race, that was most certainly the case. So for drivers, they will be using this practice session aggressively, let's say, trying to push the limits. One of the biggest differences between using this practice session and them going away, creating their own session and practicing there, is the session settings might be slightly different between the official session and whatever session they create, whether that be slight weather differences, track temperature differences, because the official practice server has more drivers on it. There could be a whole host of differing variables. So it is important for the drivers to be on the server and, seeing what the limits of the car are.
Yeah, and as the sun sort of disappeared at the moment, the clouds have started to gather over the circuit, so much so that we need some lights on the cars, and they're beaming at us now as they just fly around the circuit. Great to see. And well, with Spa-Francorchamps, as we all know, there's not many places where the lights are actually around the circuit. It's very similar to the Circuit de la Sarthe, where it's not very well lit in certain parts of the track. Of course, along the main straight, you'll have bits of lighting there. On the run down towards Eau Rouge, you'll have the lighting there. But for the rest of the track, it's pretty much under darkness. You've only got your headlights to guide you around the circuit. So this is where the different breed of drivers come in, the nighttime drivers. They are a different breed. I don't understand how they know exactly where the track is before they've even turned in. It's a wonderful skill to have, to be that quick in the night. And when the track temperatures are typically lower in the night time, so there's potentially less grip out there, there's more potential to slide the car around, they just do a fantastic job. I commend anybody who wants to do the night shift, because they can have it for all I know.
You mentioned that, and these are race cars with their headlights, which I might be completely wrong here, but I want to say they're slightly less bright than normal road cars, but I might be wrong in that regards. And I always remember, whenever I drive home at night, there's always one particular turn off from an A road that I just can't see, and I must have driven it hundreds, maybe thousands of times. But every time I get up to that in the middle of the night, I just can't see it, and I almost overshoot it every single time.
Absolutely. And it's just, nighttime driving is just a different skill in itself. I would love to be able to do it properly, but it's just not it's not something I don't think I'll ever be able to properly master it. Just leave it to the professionals out there who are currently lapping the circuit. And when it comes into the nighttime, it's that transition, isn't it? It's one of the chances in this practice session where the drivers can experience how the track could react and how it could behave in this changeover period, when the track is just starting to, well, I don't want to say devolve, because you still got the rubber down. It's just the track temperature starting to drop away, and therefore you'll have to keep an eye on your tyre temperatures as well. But it's getting that transition through and sort of understanding how quickly does the track change. Is it lap by lap? Is it minute by minute? The drivers will want to just make sure that that's down to a T as well, so that whoever's taking over knows exactly, or knows roughly, how the track can change in that amount of time.
And you mentioned the cooler track temps, but this also means you've got cooler air temps as well, which the engines do prefer, because it means that you can cool down the car far more efficiently if the air going into your car is a little bit cooler or less hot, let's say, depending where you happen to be racing. So for endurance racing, you do tend to like those nighttime stints, or at the very least, the car likes it. It just gives a chance for the car to just relax as much as a car can relax when it's being yeeted around at over 200 miles an hour on the Spa-Francorchamps circuit. But I know some drivers, they definitely do prefer nighttime conditions, mainly just because there's less things to distract them. You've only got your eye on what you need to. You don't drive around thinking, oh, That's an interesting signboard over there. That's an interesting Fanatic. I'm gonna have to check that out. Or I don't know. Sometimes drivers get bored while they're out racing in the day. I'm sure they get bored while driving in the night. Just that when they get bored in the night, there's nothing they can distract themselves with. One of the biggest things though with nighttime racing, which actually happened at Le Mans just 1 week ago, is if there are incidents, it's much harder to spot it from far away, especially if the car spins in a way such that you can't see their headlights.
Yes, that's a huge one as well. You know, you're constantly relying on a track that has limited lighting around the circuit at various high-speed corners. You're relying on lights to be able to warn you about, you know, what can happen. And it's an advancement not only in sim racing but in motorsport as well. That, you know, you'll have the lights on the cars fine, but you'll have this big yellow flashing light that lights up the whole track to warn you that something's happened up ahead. And I think that's much more effective than a flag when it comes to just a waved flag when it comes up to that warning zone, because a yellow light will really warn you, hey, there's something up ahead, you should probably take a bit of notice. Well, I say take a bit of notice. I know the story of Mika Hakkinen, who used to see a yellow flag and raise his arm but continue going through at full speed to acknowledge that he acknowledged the yellow flag. He knew it was there, but you know, he wasn't slowing down, and he admitted that willfully.
It's again, like, even when I go to karting events with all of the people I know, it's when you see a yellow flag, the rule is raise your right hand to let them know that you've seen it, but there's no change at all to your speed. You literally just look, okay, that's where the car is, just don't crash into the car over there and you're good. If you hit the car, you're completely screwed because you're getting a black flag. Ooh, that was an incident as well for Liam Rance. That was through the campus chicane.
It was, yes. He tried to go up the inside of an LMP2 car, didn't quite work for him. Oh, there goes another one as well. That's going to be the number 95 car. Just taking a little bit of a moment through the, as you say, the campus chicane. So seems to be catching a little bit of people out. Yeah, Rance tried to go up the inside and the door was closed. So obviously there's no... You don't have to get out of the way of the car behind. The blue flag in endurance racing does sort of mean that the car's behind you, but, you know, just be aware. It's up to the car that's lapping you to get the move done properly. It's not up to you to move off of the racing line. That's the standard procedure coming into endurance racing. So you'll not only see the blue flags, but you'll also see this big flashing lights off the front of these cars just to warn drivers, hello, I'm coming through. Just stick to your line.
One thing I will say, though, for any teams out there, because this actually did happen in one of the previous rounds, and one of the teams was a little bit upset about it, so the best thing to do is just stray away from it, in my opinion. But one of the drivers was coming up to lap someone, and they flashed their lights to, in their words, it was to alert the driver ahead, but the team that was ahead getting a lap, they complained that it was aggressive light flashing, and they ended up getting a penalty for it, because there is a rule in the GTR rulebook which does state that if you flash drivers aggressively, there is a penalty for that. So you can't just drive behind someone consistently flashing your lights at them as if you were a BMW in the right lane of a motorway in the UK.
Very nice, very nice. We got the reference in. It only took us how long? 45 minutes into this practice session to bring in the that one, but there you go, it's there. One driver that's having a little bit of a tough time at the moment, I think, is the number 95. That's one of the DEAC hackers cars, and I think it's the car running in second place, Roland Scholes, who's struggling for grip out there. The car just seems to be sliding on him at certain points in these high-speed corners. I've noticed it quite a bit through the campus chicane, so maybe something to do with the tyres, possibly overheating. I shouldn't say probably, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but possibly the tyres overheating. And the more the car slides, that exacerbates the problem with the tyre wear, so you slide even more, and it just builds up and up and up, and it snowballs into what can be a really big problem when it comes to tyre wear. And
you have to balance it. You have to just decide, okay, how much can I just give those tires a chance to breathe. How much can I keep on pushing so that those tire temps do come back down? It is a practice session, but maybe the drivers want to simulate what would be happening in the race itself if they did get those high temperatures. And as you mentioned, we are speculating it could be a number of things, but it is always fun for us in the commentary box to try to work out what exactly is affecting a driver. I mean, maybe for all we know, he's just going around just full locking it through a corner, just getting a drift on every now and then.
Absolutely, and here's the hypercar then of Liam Ranson, the Satellite Racing number 64, a gorgeous car if I say so myself, now tackling through Poole onto this long left-hander. And yeah, these are great cars. You can tell when it comes into the regulations in 2022, when we get these hypercars, when we get the new classes of GT cars, it's going to be a sort of a new era when it comes to endurance racing, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Is if these are the cars and what they look like and how they sound as well. It sounds glorious.
And we are expecting the DPI cars to be the faster car, but for those who remember back to the Nürburgring pole, the overall pole was actually set by Varga Sim Racing in the 117 LMP2 car. So these hypercars, these DPI cars are not that much quicker than your standard LMP2 cars, so don't expect them to be blowing out the 2-minute deads, or, as Kieran McGinley I'm sure will remind everyone, a 1:59.989, was it?
That's the one.
Did get set. Yeah.
That's the one. You took the words right out of my mouth there. Yes, that's the one. Set by the 007 of Sebastian Hoeve. So keep an eye on that one. See if any other drivers can get into the sub 2 minutes there. But Liam Rance now bringing that car back to the pit lane with a 59.727. So it's around about, as you say, less than half a second between the fastest hypercar at the moment and the fastest LMP2 car, at least in the server right now. So I have to wait and see how that all pans out over the entire session. And this is an opportunity as well to sort of state that this is probably drivers looking at race pace rather than qualifying right now. They're probably looking at these consistent pace. They're probably running race fuel, race tyres, and just running longer stints in order to see how their race pace will actually be, what's their true race pace going to be like, and how they can base the strategy off that. If there's good weather towards the end of the session, I think we'll be seeing the quali runs then, because in theory you'll have a track that's rubbered in, you'll have a track that can provide you with the most grip, and therefore it gives you the best idea of what to expect in qualifying, what to expect of the car in qualifying, and how you need to adjust the car going into that qualifying session, whether you need to maybe take a bit of aero off because there's a bit more grip out there. Who knows? But that's probably when you'll see the fast qualifying times being put in, is towards the end of the session, so long as the rain holds, which I'm hoping it does.
More grip on the track. Cars can tend to go that little bit quicker. Another thing another point to mention as well is the fact that in tomorrow's qualifying sessions, one of the 2-hour qualifying sessions will be in the day, the other one will be in the night. So it gives a mixture of two different conditions, at least different light conditions for the drivers to negotiate, or for the teams to negotiate. And whether the drivers want to change their setups between each of the two sessions is up to them, but I would imagine that they do keep it the same.
Yes, there's something's happened with the 199 in the LMP2 class going through. Ooh, that's a big one there. Hits the wall on the left-hand side, then shoots over to the right-hand side as well. Huge moment there. As one of the cars there, that's the 199. So we'll have to wait and see what happens to that. But the front right-hand wheel came off, and that was coming through Les Combes. The final part of it, just something happened there. That didn't look natural, that the car just started to go straight on there, hits the wall, and obviously front right tyre comes off. But as we've already alluded to, Yusuf, this is a practice session, so you can hit the escape button, head straight back to the pit lane, and you've got a brand new car to use.
Yeah, it's beautiful. If only that could happen in real life after any traffic accident that I get. Just quick, back to the pits, was never there. But, I mean, as you mentioned, the car just goes straight on somewhat, and I do wonder maybe if it was just a wheel disconnect or something of the sort, maybe internet connection issue, because when that does happen, you tend to see a car just going straight on. So that could have been the issue. Maybe maybe it wasn't an issue and they were just manually restarting their connection, so that happened. But thankfully, none of the other cars, none of the other drivers involved, otherwise I'm sure they wouldn't have been happy if their hot lap had been interrupted by that incident.
Yeah, very, very good point there. 199. Wait and see whether we see them out there. As you say, it could have been some sort of hardware issue, which is something that doesn't really affect motorsport. I mean, when it comes to motorsport endurance racing, you've got mechanical failures, which there is an element of in R-Factor 2, of course. There is an element of mechanical failures that can happen in this. They normally happen over time, and if you're pretty aggressive, if you shift down too early, we saw a lot of that at Monza. When you shift down too quickly, you can blow the engine up, and that's the end of your race. And we saw that happen to Viaducten as well when they were charging on through. About 6 hours to go, someone unfortunately shifted down twice when they only meant to shift down once, and that blew the engine up. So it's an element in here, but where sim racing has an element is the hardware that you use. The wheel can fail, the pedals can fail. Over a 24-hour race, it can happen. The hardware can let you down, and that's an element that we don't normally see when it comes to motorsport racing. Normally it's all about what the car can do, but sometimes your steering wheel, I've had one before where the steering wheel during a race has actually come off of my desk whilst I was racing, and I'm just sat there with the steering wheel in my hands, and I tried to put it back onto the desk. I try and mount it, and bear in mind, I think this was it was a track that had a lot of corners. I remember this specifically because as I was trying to tighten the wheel again back onto my desk, I was having to steer, and it cost me 3 seconds a lap, but it was funny. At least I can say that now. But that's another thing that can happen in the cockpit of one of these sim rigs. Luckily, lots of people have much better rigs than what I have, than a trusty desk. They'll actually have the proper cockpit set up, so something like that doesn't happen.
F1 fans like to talk about how Charles Leclerc had to hold on to his wing mirror with one hand while the other hand took him flat out through 130R at Suzuka. Meanwhile, sim racers know the pain of their steering wheel unclamping off the desk and having to reclamp it while negotiating that Canada. It happened to one of my friends who was he was doing a sim race at Canada, and his wheel came off in the middle of the race, and he's trying to frantically get it back on while making his way through corners. I mean, with some games you can just pause the game and continue, but with others you most certainly can't, and depending on what kind of wheel you have, if it's one that has stronger force feedback on it, it becomes a lot more difficult to be able to do.
It does, and especially if you're racing online, you can't pause it then. No, you've got to keep racing on, and you've got to try and solve them on the fly. I think I remember back to, was it Le Mans 2020, when it was solely sim racing? I seem to remember someone changed their entire rig during the race. They pulled over to the side of the track. They got out of their one rig, pushed it to one side, grabbed another rig, and then set it all up and changed it within about a minute. It was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. Possibly more remarkable that they had two rigs, one as a spare. And I definitely thought to myself, that's a professional driver, because you and I would go in there with one rig and think, right, if anything goes wrong, that's that. But professional drivers have two of them, one just as a spare, just for spare parts. That to me is a spirit of endurance racing, just to have a spare something on the side.
I mean, it's not even a spare something. I mean, you could understand, here's another wheelbase that I can throw on, here's another wheel rim that I can throw on, but no, just another rig entirely. And you just... it's a bit crazy, to be honest. I know with some people they've had brake failures. I think it was Max Verstappen on iRacing one time. He had a brake failure and went off, and I think he went and got another pedal. As I just got the scare of my life, because I'm pretty sure I saw a spider on my wall just disappear out of vision. I didn't get like a full glance. I just saw something like disappear. So I'm not sure if my mind is playing tricks on me, my eyes are playing tricks on me, or if there is now a spider just lurking in my room somewhere.
It's a terrifying thought, but you're going to have to live with that for the for quite some time. Hopefully, whatever it is, it's not going to scare you. I really hope it doesn't, but you never know. It's endurance racing; anything can happen. Isn't that the same? But we'll have to wait and see how that all transpires. At the moment, we've still got just the one time in at least the LMP2 classes that's underneath the 2-minute barriers, but there's actually fewer improvements than what I was expecting. Not many times have changed since we've come onto the air. They're relatively, close together. I think we're looking at 16, 17. What are we looking at here? We're looking at top 6 by 1.5 seconds at the moment. So that's pretty good. In fact, top 8 is just over 1.5 seconds. It's the number 15 of the Juices Motorsports Club, number 15 with a 2:01.750. So roughly within 1.5 seconds is the top 7 or 8 times. But there's not been a lot of changes, maybe fewer changes than I was really expecting through this practice session. So maybe there's elements of track cooling here that are taking effect.
I did see at one point a 59.7 popped up for Liam Rance, but then when I refreshed my timing sheet, it disappeared again. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with my timing, because one timing sheet is kind of working when I refresh it. The other timing sheet is not working for me. It's about 60 minutes behind. So I don't know why I said 60 minutes. I could have just said an hour behind, but that's where we are.
It's all about endurance racing. You've got to be precise. You've got to have the information there. 60 seconds sounds better than 60 minutes sounds better than an hour. So I would stand by it, Yusuf.
I mean, here we are, we're talking about endurance racing and how accurate the drivers have to be, how consistent they have to be, and, being able to manage their car so their car doesn't break over a 24-hour race. Meanwhile, I can't even get my timing system to work for more than 5 minutes.
Another beautiful sense of endurance racing, that's for sure. So even the commentators can come across a couple of problems that they've just got to work on the fly. So it can happen to anybody. The spirit of a 24-hour is here to stay.
Never get involved with the commentator's hunger mid-broadcast.
That sounds like you're speaking from experience.
It is.
Okay. I suppose we'll have to question you on that one very, very soon, of course.
Well, maybe that's something that our viewers can take a while and wait for, because we're going to be jumping on into a break. We're halfway through our practice session for round 5 of the GTR 24H Endurance E-Racing World Championship at Spa-Francorchamps. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Round 5, that 24 Hours of Spa-Francorchamps is brought to you in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, Leap Gaming, Global Flix, Film Volt, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
Welcome back, folks, as we are jumping on into the final hour of practice. And I don't know why, Kieran, but I just got really thrown off there because I heard our producer say that we're back live. And for some reason, I was just thinking, oh, Kieran's going to bring us back in. And then I thought, wait, no, we didn't agree on that. I need to bring us back in. Wait, what am I going to say? Racing, Endurance Racing World Championship. But as I mentioned, one more hour remaining of practice. And so far, Kieran, it's been practice. We've seen some incidents. We've seen some drivers get into the 59s and then those times mysteriously disappear from our timing sheet. But all in all, it's been avoid of any huge incidents, let's say.
Yeah, nothing big to report. There's been one crash at Lake Holm where someone lost a wheel. That's going to be, I think, the biggest incident we've had so far. Other than that, we've had a couple of mistakes here and there. Nothing out of the ordinary for a practice session where drivers are trying to find the limit. As there's a spin out right in towards La Source hairpin there. Wow, I saw that on board. I don't know whether the production team saw that one, but wow, that was amazing. I just about avoided that one. So that was the number 57 car who just about managed to avoid that one, which is the Ramada Motorsport car. So very, very fine margins there. But just to interrupt myself there, nothing out of the ordinary. A couple of spins, as I just saw there, going in towards La Source. But it's been a pretty decent practice session for all involved because it means that they're actually honing in their efforts and honing in their styles of driving. So it's looking like it's going to be a good qualifying and race because the drivers here look pretty dialed in at the moment.
Now, Kieran, it is one of our first times commentating together. We had a little stint together at Monza, but you're getting to learn more about me as a commentator, and what a lot of my co-commentators will learn is I have some interesting games that I like to bring up on broadcasts, and I like to call them Milky's games. So we're going to play one of these games, and it's just something completely random. It's something that comes up off the top of my head, and it's about Spa, because there are a few corner names that I always get mixed up with other corner names. So, Kieran, why don't you take us through? No cheating by looking at the track map, all right?
Okay.
But can you take us through all of the corner names at Spa from turn 1 to the final corner, and let's see how well you can remember them.
Right, okay. We've got La Source.
Yep.
Now, you've got the run down towards Eau Rouge.
Yes.
Now, I believe that little right-hander along the pit straight doesn't have a name, so I'm going to say Eau Rouge at the bottom, up the hill, over Radion.
Yep.
And then we get on towards... There's a slight right-hander, which is Kemmel. Then it's the Kemmel straight. And then I've got the chicane. It's like the right, left, right of Lacon.
Yep.
And then we head down towards... I know this one because I say it most times. I know this one because it's a French name.
Yes.
French town, and I know this one.
It's not a French town. It's a town in Belgium.
Oh, okay. Oh, Bruxelles. Yes, Bruxelles. Bruxelles in towards... Now, the left-hander, I genuinely don't know this one because I thought this was renamed X Corner about a year and a half ago, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. But it might have no name, so I'm not sure. But that's that left-hander. Now, I don't know why. There's a bit of debate coming up towards... I've always called it Pouan. Some people know it as double gauche, but I know it either way.
I've heard that.
And then we get into the part where I'm not so sure on. I know it's the campus chicane. We've got... There's a right-hander that comes before Stavolo, and I don't know that one. But then you've got Stavolo, the long right-hander with that ominous firewall on the left-hand side. Cours pour frère. into Blanchimont, then on towards the chicane. Used to be the bus stop chicane, now it's just called the chicane. And on to the start-finish straight. How did I do, Yusuf?
You did pretty well. So you forgot. So you said it was a right, left, right, and you said that was Lecom. But it's actually the right, left of Lecom, and then the right-hander after that is Malmedy.
Okay.
Then you've got Brussels, and that left-hander, everyone calls no name, but according to Alex Goldschmidt, is actually called Speaker's Corner or Commentator's Corner, because that is where the commentators used to be based. How true that is, I don't know. You'll have to take Alex Goldschmidt and our producer Peter Moncom's word for it. Piwon,
yes,
absolutely correct.
They are beacons of knowledge, so we'll take that.
So then, as you said, this is the part where you weren't sure is also the part where I'm not sure, because every time I look at a different track map to prepare for a race at Spa, it gives something different. So what I've gone on to believe is that the right-left is the Fanias chicane, then the right-hander is Campus, then you've got Stavolo onto Curve Paul Frere. But I'm looking at the GTR timing map, which says that the chicane is the right-hander is Fanias, the left-hander is Campus, then you've got Stavolo and Paul Frere of two right-handers, and there's no Curve Paul Frere after that. So who knows? Who knows?
I think I did all right, though. I mean, we're talking 80% here, or at least 80% there. But
so, as our producer Peter has said, the track map that is on the screen is from Wikipedia. So I'm going to do something else, which is I'm going to say that presumably, and hear me out on this one, but I'm going to say that the Belgians have it right. And I'm not talking about any Belgians here. I'm talking about the Belgians that own Spa-Francorchamps probably know what the corners are called. So I'm going to open up Racing Circuits Info, Belgium, and go into Spa to double check this. So,
well, even then, I'm pretty sure Racing Circuits has discrepancies as well. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So even then, I think our beacon of knowledge over this one will have to be the official Spa-Francorchamps website, because somewhere on there will be the track map, and they will definitively say which corner is which. And I think that's the one we'd have to go for. Other than that, you're absolutely right. It's Sector 1's fine. Everyone seems to be happy with Sector 1. Sector 2, there's a couple of discrepancies. As I said, in towards Lake Con, well, there's actually an extra corner. Malmedy is the right-hander at the third part of the chicane. So there's that as well. And then we get into the third sector, where I think anyone outside of Belgium has just made it up on the spot. That's what I'm going with there.
So when I was looking at Racing Circuit, it was how I said, but as you mentioned, it wasn't Pouon, it was the double gauche. So yes, it's interesting. Now, the Circuit Spa-Francorchamps website refuses to give a map. Circuit.
Oh, this is typical. We're building suspense here.
We are. And just like everyone's favourite show or anime, there won't be a conclusion to it. We'll have to wait for season 2.
We do have a Ferrari out there on track at long last. It's been a while since we've seen a Ferrari out on track in one of the GTE classes. A lovely blue and red livery there. It's the number 26. Now, actually, that should be the GT3 car of One Move Esports. So, see how the Ferrari gets on there. That team is in third place in the standings in the GT3 class at the moment, just making their way now on through Fania and then on towards Campus, as now I know those are the actual corners. Onwards we go for the number 26, and as I said, third place in the standings and running pretty well recently. Sebring got them 25 points there. The Nürburgring not so well. They scored 8 points there. It brings them on a total of 63 points, but they have a healthy gap over the 404 Glam Racing team. The only problem is they're slightly out of reach of Unison and Mugen, who have been pretty dominant this season. I don't think either team has finished outside of the top 3 at the moment in class, so they've been pretty dominant going all the way through. So interesting to see as the Ferrari heads up towards the line. Currently second fastest in this session, as you can see by the green LED number 02 on the left-hand side of the windscreen as we see it, and stays as the 02, so stays as the second fastest GT3 car in this practice session.
Yeah, doing a good job so far, as you mentioned. Both Unison Racing and Mugen Sim Racing yet to finish outside of the top 3 so far this season. One Move Esports almost able to be in that. Well, actually, no, sorry, it's Glam Racing who have been in the almost in the podium. They've been top 4 every race. They've had 2 third-place finishes and a three fourth-place finishes and a third-place finish as well. We almost had, actually, in the GTE class last time round, our 4th race winner of the season, but Musto were able to secure that one as Deuces Motorsport just a little bit shy of the mark. In fact, they ended up finishing in 3rd place. We're 1 hour 15 minutes into practice session, 2 hours of practice, and then we will be back tomorrow evening for our first of 2 2-hour qualifying sessions. And so far it is Sebastian Hove who is at the top of the standings, and now my timing sheet is telling me, Kieran, that he's actually put in a 59.768.
But hey, there we go. I don't make these things up. There we have, in theory, then 2 lap times that are underneath the 2-minute barrier. One set by the hypercar and one set by the LMP2. So that's a good sign there, and shows a good sign that I am absolutely spot on right, and you should never doubt me again. But we'll wait and see, because obviously the clouds are descending onto the circuit. I've just I heard about 2 minutes ago from Peter, our producer, that the rain is now not expecting to hit the circuit anymore. We might just miss the rain. So whether that's good news or bad news for the drivers, we will have to wait and see. Let's have a look at the radar here as it shows us where the rain is. Yeah, it's almost like whenever I'm here in the commentary box, it always seems to split apart just before it gets to the circuit. And whether that's a good thing for drivers or not is another question. So we'll obviously keep an eye on that one for you and let you know what's happening. But 45 minutes left of the broadcast in the practice session. So we'll have to see if the rain hits at any point. But looking at it, it's looking good.
You can see that those clouds were approaching the circuit, but as they got closer and closer, you could tell that they had lost their contents of water over whatever poor part of Belgium that they had already arrived at. So it does at the moment look like there isn't rain, but we'll have to see how much water is left in those clouds when they do eventually reach the circuit. But for now, we can enjoy some nice dry weather laps. Ludovic Darqui on your screen at the moment in that One Move Esport car. Currently sitting P2 in class. Just looking around, actually, we are seeing, I think it was Turn Lower, who has been trying to climb up the order. No, it was David Kalok-Sai, who's jumped up to P5 in the LMP2 class. Just a couple of tenths behind Shaba Kiss, and maybe he can climb further up the order, having set a 2-minute 1.3.
Yes, and still plenty of time in the session to do that as well. So have to wait and see how that goes. The Ferrari has a little bit of a moment at the double gauche and comes back to the pit lane. Again, press the escape button. You can abandon that lap time and have a fresh car for you when you get back. But yeah, clearly the car just was not going to behave through double gauche and decided to back out of it entirely, which is a pretty wise move. And that's going to be a wise move if it comes into qualifying, where pressing escape doesn't work anymore.
So I've decided to check what gauche means in.
I could have told you.
Well, I wanted to check
left.
what it would be in Dutch, right? But I didn't check it up in English. Do you know what the English meaning for gauche is?
Yes, it means left. It means left in French.
Oh, is it left in French?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's opposite of à droite, which is right, and à gauche is to left.
Oh,
you could have just asked me. It's one of the only bits of French I know.
Is it? Well, how was I supposed to know that you knew French?
Well, I mean, look at me, you know. Does this not say French speaker to you? No,
not really.
Double gauche is just double left. That's all it is. Which it's a perfect description of what the corner is. As far as that, no, my French goes no further, so I won't be able to help you with anything else. Bruxelles might mean Brussels, but don't quote me on that.
Is that French or is that Belgian or Dutch?
Well, it's not Dutch, you can't say Dutch in Belgium. You'd have to say Flemish.
Say that. Okay. See, my Belgian friend, I always ask him, what language do you speak in Belgium? Because I know with my Swiss friend, he's like, right, we speak German over here, we speak French over here, and down here we speak Italian, but all of us can speak English anyway. So I was asking my friend, what do you speak in Belgium? And he's like, Dutch. I'm like, not Flemish. He's like, no, Dutch. I'm like, okay. So, yeah.
I always know that sometimes you don't speak Dutch in Belgium, you speak Flemish, but you can also speak French. There's bits of German as well that people will speak. So I think Belgium's one of those multilingual countries where some of them will also speak English as well. So yeah, it's a very multilingual country. It's a fair shout to have, but it just depends which part of France you're in. And obviously with coming in towards Spa-Francorchamps, it's considered a home track for some Dutch drivers as well, because it is so close to it's so richly populated by Dutch speakers. So it's very, very fair that if it's not, I mean, we don't have endurance races at Zandvoort. If we did, it would be very interesting because the track is so narrow. I'm not sure how endurance racing would go around a track like Zandvoort. But that's probably why you'll see a lot of Dutch support around Spa-Francorchamps, and any Dutch drivers that turn up to Spa-Francorchamps will instantly have a lot of backing behind them.
Now, we've kind of deviated away from the main topic, which was about gauche and the meaning of it. Because do you know what the English meaning of gauche is?
Well, I would have assumed... Oh, that's a huge one there for two cars involved, the 007 and the 199 LMP2 cars coming out of Les Combes, and that is actually Les Combes. So the English translation of gauche, which I would have said is left.
Yeah.
So there you go.
The English meaning of gauche, because gauche is a word in the English dictionary, apparently.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. No, I don't know.
This is what I meant by it, yeah.
Oh, okay, no, I don't know then.
So apparently it means unsophisticated and socially awkward. So I like that meaning of the double gauche left-hander. It can be the doubly socially awkward left-hander. And considering how Pouan is, I think that it is almost an accurate description of the corner.
It's a harsh description of the corner, but it is a description nonetheless. So I suppose we'll have to make sure it lives by that forevermore. So there we go, doubly socially awkward. Let's see if we can have that catch on for the rest of the endurance. I'm not sure how many people will follow that, Yusuf. No. I don't know, but we can give it a try.
Easter egg.
It's a little Easter egg, yeah. Just if you watch the practice, you will know that little Easter egg for the entire weekend. This is why you don't miss a session. This is exactly why, because you'll miss these tidbits heading into the rest of the weekend.
Can you imagine how confused Ewan O'Leary's going to be when he gets in and we're commentating and we're like, yeah, so he gets a move down into doubly socially awkward. We're like, what are you on about? But I think we just don't tell him. We just leave him in the dark for the entire race, and then with like an hour left, we then reveal it to him.
I think that's just the way to go. That's just the way it is. That's how it will be. I mean, unfortunately, this is the only session I'll be in for the entire weekend. So I've laid the Easter egg down. So now you have to make sure it lives on.
I will. I will honour your memory, Kieran.
Thank you.
Into the race.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. So we've got quite a bit of time left in this practice session, just over 40 minutes to go in this practice session, or so as my maths will lead me to believe. And, well, we've seen a couple more incidents. We've seen two cars off at Les Combes. But again, no real movements in the timing sheets. We've seen the appearance now of the GT3 Ferrari into this practice session, which has gone second fastest in class. But really, we're looking at Sabakis here in the number 15 Juice's Motorsport Club. Now, this is Juice's Motorsport Club, I think, running two different drivers, and that's why you'll see both of them running the number 15, is that they are allowed to do this. If you're just tuning in now, welcome along, wherever you've been. You've missed a lot, and not just the driving sense, but you'll see lots of drivers out there using the same number, using the same livery, and that's because they are part of the same team. They are allowed to do that in practice. You are allowed to run multiple cars with the same livery and the same number, so that your drivers have an equal amount of time in an official practice session to set some times. Once we get to qualifying and the race, that will then become void, you'll then have to stick to one car for the entire session. Adding to that, you'll no longer be able to use escape to come back to the pit lane once the practice session has finished. Once qualifying starts, that's it. You have to then respect the fact that you've got to come back to the pit lane, and you can't just pull over to the side and escape back to the pit lane, which is a very fair. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer in terms of endurance racing, because when do you ever see I'd love to see like some of the Le Mans drivers have a little bit of a crash, but then just suddenly the car's instantly back into pit lane. We've got a brand new one now. That'd be pretty interesting. That would spice it up a little bit. It would be expensive, but it would spice it up a little bit.
Will you say that back in the day, in old F1, they used to have that. You'd have a third car, and my dad would always tell me this story about Ayrton Senna at the old France circuit, which was, I can remember this, many cars, where apparently the timing line, or the start-finish line, was right out of the exit of the final corner. So apparently when the drivers would grid up, the grid would go around this final corner. And quote-unquote, in qualifying, Ayrton Senna crashed his car across the line because that way he didn't have to slow down for the final corner, and then he could just use a different car for the race.
I don't know how true that is.
I don't know. It's they say old wives' tales. This is old dad's tales about racing.
That sounds a bit. I just don't know why you'd wreck a car just for that. If you were going to do that,
beat Alan Prost in qualifying and Lord one over him.
I suppose, but I don't know. I don't know about that one. I'm going to have to look that one up. Now you've piqued my interest, and now I must look into it further. I'll have to see if that's actually if that actually happened. I don't remember that. That would have been a bigger story if that happened. Because I know. As Peter and my producers say, they used to do a lot to beat each other. That's very true. Yeah. They used to do quite a bit. But yeah, I don't know about that one. I completely am with you on the fact that Manicourt has a very early timing line, and that was a common thing in qualifying, and especially when it came to the end of the race where you'd actually cross the start-finish line, but the checkered flag we waved further down the pit lane straight, so it didn't quite make a lot of sense. But what will be will be. And yeah, that was it's a shame we haven't been back to Manicourt since, and it is still used for racing, but not as much as it was. The two teammates coming through La Source there, but both of them managing to possibly wave each other by and come back to the pit lane, but just a little bit of close running there just to get used to traffic. Yeah, I think Manicourt, I think it was a narrow circuit, which is probably why it's not used a lot nowadays for Formula One, because it evolves so much that the cars are getting wider and wider. It's the same in endurance racing, that the cars have got wider and wider over the years, not to the extent that Formula One has. You were mentioning about the T cars in the olden days. It was only the early 2000s the T car stopped being a thing. In fact, I would go as far as saying 2004, 2005 was when the T-cars stopped being things anymore. Because I remember, I don't remember, but at this circuit in particular, all the way back in 1998, where you had the absolute carnage start, and Murray Walker, in his own words, saying this start is absolutely appalling and one of the worst he'd ever seen. But you had teams that actually had, that someone off into the gravel there. That's Zoltan Boda for the Juices Motorsports Club. Off into the gravel. Now, that was probably coming in towards Malmedy. That looked like the gravel trap there, suspiciously. But you had T cars then, and you had, I think there was two teams. Could have been one, could have been two, where both drivers were caught up in the incident. So they had to decide which driver was going to get the T car to take into the race. So that was that must be an awkward conversation between two drivers. Right, which of us is going to drive? How do you decide that? I don't know.
I definitely know who was getting the T car if you were driving for Ferrari at the time, and it wouldn't have been you. It would have been your teammate Michael Schumacher.
It would have been absolutely Eddie Irvine, and I'm going to stick on that hill until the cows come home. Savakis then making his way out onto the track then in the number 15 Juices Motorsport Club, currently fourth at the moment in class. It's a very respectable lap time as well, looking at the leaderboards, but nearly a second off of the 57 Ramada Motorsport car, and that's going to show, well, as I've already alluded to, there's going to be different strategies being run here. You're going to be running different cars. There might be different fuel lines. There might be different setups on the car. Some might be putting in consistent laps for the race. Some might just be doing cycle laps and seeing where the grip is. It's a multitude of things that could be going on in this session so far. But at the moment, Sabakis is 4th fastest.
Precisely so. Now, I've got another one of my Milky games for you, and our producer Peter can join on into this as well. So, when do you think the last time Formula 1 raced at Magny-Cours was?
Right, let me think about this, because it was, I'm going to say, we didn't race there in 09, and we definitely raced there in 07, because I remember Lewis Hamilton got a penalty for overtaking at it's the quick right left chicane, I forget the name of it now, but he was deemed to have gained an advantage in 07, and I remember playing the Magny-Cours track on F106, so it was definitely around then. So my only reference is, did we race there in 08, which trying to think off the top of my head, I don't remember us racing in 08 at Magny-Cours.
I'm just going to say you're doing much better than me, because I would have thought it'd be early 2000s, as I barely remember.
The only reason I remember that is because Hamilton got a penalty, and because it was such huge. I'm going to say the last race there was 07. That is going to be my answer.
And Peter, when do you think? Okay, so Peter has gone with the anti-Kieran answer of saying 2006. You're both wrong. It was 2008 the last
I should have said 08. Oh well, 1 year out's not so bad, and not like Peter, who was 2 years out. That's respectable for me.
Yeah. Also,
I'll
now I'm looking at the track map. I've never seen a track before where it names its corners after other circuits. You've got Estoril, you've got Adelaide, you've got the Nürburgring chicane and the Imola chicane.
Pretty sure you also had Indianapolis at Magny-Cours as well. Or am I making that
Le Mans.
up?
I don't know if
you have it at Le Mans, yeah.
I don't know if it is in Magny-Cours.
I always thought there was, but yeah, I might be making that. I might be getting confused now with the track we've got next month, or a couple of months' time, I should say. To round off the entire EEWC series, which I'm very much looking forward to. We'll get to see. That really is the pinnacle, isn't it? I mean, Spa 24 hours is fantastic, and the weather can produce some amazing results. We saw in the recent endurance in motorsport how it can really throw up some interesting results. And I think it goes down as well, Spa-Francorchamps, as still, right now in modern day, one of the most dangerous circuits we race at. I mean, when you speak of a dangerous track... Yeah, I mean, when you speak of a dangerous track, you the first tracks that come to mind are Macau, because it's so narrow, but it's such a quick circuit. You could argue Baku's on a similar level of that, because it is such a narrow circuit compared to the speeds the drivers take through. But Spa-Francorchamps is one of the last remaining old school circuits that hasn't changed a lot, not really since the 1980s. We've had the bus-stop chicane modified to become a slower chicane. We also had, in 1994, we had riding on board with David Serra. We'll be able to see this down in towards Eau Rouge, or in 1994, in the wake of the passing of Ayrton Senna. They actually changed the layout of Eau Rouge, so it used to go much further to the left there, then back to the right, and then rejoining back onto the circuit. And that was only for 1 year to try and slow the cars down, because they sort of, as a response to it, they tried to slow the cars down at many circuits. It wasn't just Spa-Francorchamps, they tried to do it at many other circuits just for the time being to slow the cars down. But other than that, those are the major changes that have happened, and even then, one of them wasn't permanent. So it's a track that hasn't actually really changed over the years. And because of that, there's the one thing that has changed for me is the gravel trap on the outside of the climb through Radion. And that's just been replaced by tarmac now. And there's been a lot of talk about whether the track brings back the gravel trap on the left-hand side, and it's always going to cause a little bit of debate, because yes, with a tarmac you're allowed to take a little bit of a mistake, and drivers there are saying that, well, because there's tarmac on the left-hand side, you can go through there flat out, because, well, in essence, there's no punishment. If you run wide, if you slightly go onto the tarmac, there's no real punishment other than you have to back off. With gravel there, you might start to see drivers lifting, but it's a double-edged sword here, because you get some drivers that agree that a gravel trap should be there. You'll get some drivers that disagree and say, no, keep it tarmac. But it's always going to be one of those polarising debates about Spa-Francorchamps that you know, it comes down to the fact of it's such a legendary track, you don't want to change it too much, but you know, it might be subjected to changes, especially in the light of the last 4 or 5 years, especially.
And I mean, it was the same at Monza, wasn't it? They removed the gravel trap through Parabolica, which a lot of drivers weren't fans of, and it just means that now there is a margin for error. And as is the case with every single racing driver that ever existed, if you remove gravel trap or do something that means that there is now a margin for error, the drivers are just going to use that bit of tarmac anyway because they can, you go faster. Now all of a sudden there's a new margin of error that if they make a mistake there, well, they're going to hit a wall because they're that much closer to it. So I think, as you mentioned, some drivers prefer having gravel traps, some drivers don't. I personally quite like the gravel trap through Parabolica because it's not, I know a lot of people say part of the excitement of racing is the danger to it, but for me, it's with the likes of Parabolica is what can happen if you make a mistake. And if you make a mistake into a Parabolica, no, you're not going to go flying off into an Armco barrier. You're going to go into a gravel trap. And I think it was even a couple of years ago where wasn't there an incident where one of the support Formula cars got caught in the catch fencing on the exit of Parabolica?
That's right, it went up onto the sausage curb and the car just catapulted into the air and into the catch fence, and you're absolutely right, everyone walked away from that one very, very fortunately. But you're right, you know, it comes down to, well, the tarmac allows for drivers to make mistakes and, you know, keeps the cars relatively in check. But as you said as well, when you take the gravel trap and when you start taking it away, you know, you will slow the cars down with a gravel trap, but that means they're not very recoverable anymore.
Well, something that is recoverable, at least on the broadcast, is the fact that we have overshot by 5 minutes. But we can still go back anyway and jump on into our commercial break. And when we return, we will have the last half an hour of practice live and uninterrupted until the very end. Stay tuned to GTR 24H for more sim racing action.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Round 5, that 24 hours of Spa-Francorchamps is brought to you in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, Leap Gaming, Global Flix, Film Volt, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
Well, welcome back here to the GT 24-hour circuit Spa-Francorchamps practice session, bringing us now into the closing stages of our broadcast. As you've missed a lot of the Milky Games. You've missed me getting Manicure wrong by just 1 year, which I'm really gutted about. But Yusuf is back now and can rejoin us for the final minutes of this practice session and broadcast.
The final minute. Wait, we've only got a minute left.
I said minutes. I said minutes. Minutes.
I missed the S.
Right.
It's just been a broadcast of missing stuff. I mean, some people have missed Kieran's insane prediction. Some call it the most incredible prediction since that one guy bet 50 quid on Leicester winning the Premier League. But here we are. And actually, we've got another 59 lap time coming in. This time is Roland Zux in the 95 car. He's just set a 59.607, and Zabak is very close to the mark, but sadly just missing out a 2-minute.086.
Yeah, and then it's Pedro Ramada then in the 2-minutes.164 for the Ramada Motorsport 57. Zoltan Varkonyi in fourth place, 201.099 in the 95 DEAC Hackers car. And rounding off the top five, 1.7 off the pace, 2-minutes.1.3 is the Mugen Sim Racing 22 of Christopher Kianek. That's in the LMP2 class. We've only seen the one hypercar here tonight, which set a 159.6 if I remember rightly, but no longer in the service, so that lap time is no longer showing for us. And then we've got a handful in the GTE and GT3, trying to get those two mixed up. But looking at the timings here, it's relatively close when we look at the entire LMP2 class. I mean, we're looking at 2-3 seconds covering these, well, I will say teams, but it's the drivers is a more realistic and probably a better description.
Yeah, it is very close in the LMP2 class. It's closer than what we have been used to seeing from the LMP2 class. And I mean, even if you look from, the 777 car, Luca Goin did a 202.1 all the way up to Sabakis in second, 2-minute.0. So you're talking about 2 seconds separating 90% of the field, or well, 90% is a stretch, about 80% of the field, which it's not a large amount. It's close between I'd say the GT cars, but we haven't had many GT lap times coming in. You've got David Serra and Daniela Primavera for the Mosto guys. They're out in the GTE class. In the GT3 class, it is just Martin Militai and Henrik Hoyer who are in the service. So it's only really the LMP2s that we are getting much of an idea of in practice.
Yeah, and it's great to see because it's a good championship battle there, or at least for second place, because Varga Sim Racing and the 117 have been absolutely blowing away the competition at the moment. They, from what I can see, have got so many good pole positions at this point in the season. In fact, they haven't dropped a pole position so far. It'd be interesting to see what they can turn up with if they are racing here at the 24 Hours of Spa-Francorchamps, but they're leading the way on 101 points, 40 points clear of Mugen Sim Racing, the number 22 car. Then it's the number 15 of the Juices Motorsport car on 48 points, rounding off the top four, the number 57 of the Ramada Motorsport. So a lot of these teams we're seeing at the pointy end of the field are running in that top half of the order in the LMP2 class. For the hyperclass cars, it's the 64 Satellite Racing at the top of the table. In fact, the two Satellite Racing cars are at the top of the order, 64-65. That is the order. Vidukton, the number one car, rounding off our top three, with Omicron yet to score some points on the board. Looking pretty close, looking at the GTE and GT3 classes though, Yusuf.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was going to jump on to those GT classes, but I've just been informed by one of the Juices driver, Mr. Turnlower himself, who has joined us for an interview. Turn, can you hear us? He has unmuted himself, but we can't hear him, so there does seem to be an issue for now, Kieran. But hopefully we can speak... we can hear you now, Turn. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, yeah. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. How's the track been? How's Spa-Francorchamps in the afternoon for you?
Really good. Spa is a wonderful track to drive on, and it shows every time how it can be driven, and it's really cool to do, especially if it's in a pit too. Really fun.
Now, for you guys in Deuces, you're sitting third in the championship. You're only 13 points behind Mugen. What's the objective for you guys this race? Is it just to chip away at that gap, or is it to try to jump ahead of them in the championship?
Obviously, we want to win, and we don't know about Mugen, and we don't really care. We just want to win ourselves, and then we look after that on the championship. It's still 24-hour racing, so quite a lot.
Now, you mentioned that you want to win. So far, Varga Sim Racing have looked very strong this season. Do you guys, have you found something that little bit extra to be able to take the challenge up to them?
We hope to, yeah. We have a really good set right now, and we are really fast, and we have the right strategy, and I think we can really, if they are racing, we can really have a jump on them.
Okay, I mean, Kieran, do you have any questions for Turn?
Yes, Turn, it's nice to meet you. Hopefully you're having a great time. I mean, we're just looking at the timing sheets at the moment. Eighth fastest out of all the drivers so far. I mean, obviously with a practice session like this, you don't want to be giving too much away, but what's the feeling like heading in towards the qualifying session tomorrow?
Yeah, really good. Saba is doing some quality runs, and he's messing up every time and still pretty close, so we're really good, and the race pace we show right now is not even the full race pace, so it's looking really good.
And you've already mentioned about how much you love Spa-Francorchamps. I mean, looking at the weather, we're in the Ardennes forest. It's a recipe for unpredictable weather. How do you prepare the team and yourself for what could be one of the most unpredictable forecasts of the year?
You can't replicate what you're driving with, so you really like looking at the radar and stuff. When you're not driving and spotting someone, you're like always on the radar and seeing if it's maybe going to rain and when, and then build something from that, and just hopefully you will drive it to the end and not crash it too hard.
Absolutely, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the weekend. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, and I will maybe come back for a race.
Well, wonderful to hear from Turn, and great for him to jump on in. It's always nice when we get to hear a few of the drivers over practice, just to get their thoughts on how things have been going. I mean, he says that he's really confident in times. I didn't want to say it in the interview, but they're currently sitting second, but he's been mentioning Zarbakis has been making a few mistakes. Endearingly said that Zarbakis has been having a few bad laps out on track.
Yeah, and that can only be a good thing, can't it? Because if he's selling quote-unquote bad laps and he's still pretty quick, he's turning a bit of pace about it, then that's just good fortune for the rest of the weekend. So clearly the spirits are high at Juices Motorsport, and you know, they clearly said they want to go out there and win. As you say, they've got a tough order on their hands because they've got a team up there that's won 3 out of the last 4. So it's going to be tough for them, but in endurance racing, anything can happen.
And for Deuces yet to finish in second place. They've had a couple of third place finishes, and you mentioned earlier on, Kieran, that drivers will, you know, accept that they have some bad tracks. I honestly think drivers will say that every single track is one of their bad tracks and that's why they didn't do well, and similarly they will say that every single lap they did in practice was a terrible lap with tons of mistakes and they could go 2 seconds quicker.
Well, that's the thing, because you don't want to show your cards. You want to keep them close to your chest as much as possible in a practice session. You don't want to give away valuable bits of telemetry to the rest of the other teams. If you're doing well at a circuit, there are going to be other teams. I mean, we were speaking there to 10 about how, you know, you've got someone constantly looking at the weather radar and trying to feed back to the team, what's the weather going to be like? You've got to have an inkling that teams are going to be out there looking at what you're doing, or at least having an idea of what the entire field is doing. This is endurance racing. You're going to be looking at the lap times of other teams. You're going to be looking at the drivers that are setting those lap times and trying to put the two together and say, does that actually make sense? Should they be lapping that quickly, or should they be lapping? Are they holding something back? So when you come into a practice session, take the times with a pinch of salt. The real time where you'll find out where you'll be on the grid and where you'll be for a good portion of the race is when you put your fastest driver in the car for qualifying and say, go for it.
as I would say, don't be a standard F1 fan thinking that Mercedes won't be dominant heading into a season, apart from this season, because they haven't been dominant. And, well, either way, turn lower, very confident coming on in, and we'll see whether they'll be able to net their second place of the season, or maybe even a first place of the season come the Saturday 24-hour race. Of course, you also have to remember that despite having really good pace, there's also a whole bunch of other factors to consider. You know, tyre wear and probably more notably fuel consumption as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a main thing, and that's what these drivers are going to be using this practice session for. I mean, if you've got the right UI for rVactor2, it will tell you how much fuel you've used on the last lap, and if you just have a look at that every time you pass the start-finish line, you get an idea of how much on average you're going to be using, and you could use that to calculate the maths. And when it comes to endurance racing as well, you'll see the drivers attempt to do the sort of lift and coast technique, where at certain points in the track they'll start to lift, and especially with one of these hypercars or the LMP2 cars, you'll use the downforce that the car is making, the drag, the natural drag that the car is creating, to slow the car down. You'll lift off about 200 meters before the braking zone and allow the engine braking to take over, therefore saving fuel because you're not using it to the fullest extent. And that can have an effect on, you know, the lap times, as it would, because you're lifting off, you're not putting the car to its full potential. So it's finding the elements of the track of, can we actually save a little bit of fuel, therefore run lighter throughout the entire race?
And I feel like Spa is a very good track for lifting and coasting into corners, especially considering that there are quite a few corners that you go into without using much brakes. One of those being Puan. Yes, you'll jump onto the brakes, but it's not like you're going down into turn one, you know, massively stamping onto the brakes. You're just slowing the car down, and you know, a lot of the time you'll find that if you do just lift off and ease your way into the corner, you'll end up finding that you exit the corner with more speed and you actually gain time on the corner exit. So I think Spa is one of those tracks that can reward lifting and coasting. As I mentioned, Puan, you've got a few other corners as well. You've got the Camper, or you've got the Fania chicane just after that, heading down into Campus and Stavlo. Stavlo, I think, is pretty much flat in these cars, but again, a little lift doesn't hurt and can save some critical fuel as well.
Yeah, a little lift won't hurt, but you've got to take into account of how much tyre wear there will be, because that tyre wall on the left-hand side on the exit of Stavlo gets closer and closer and closer with every lap that passes. So you've got to have your wits about you about the tyre wear, and especially if you're running a double stint on a set of tyres, you're going to have to be extra careful about how much load the tyres can take, especially into the long part of a potential double stint.
And don't forget, for these LMP2 cars as well, they only run about 40-45 minutes on a single stint, so they'll possibly be even triple stinting their tyres at points as well. I know they have done it at some of the previous rounds. I don't know whether they'll do it here at Spa, but I'd say it's quite likely that at least one team will do or pull off a triple stint at some point in the race. And yeah, as you mentioned, tyre wear, huge. If you understeer through Stavlo, that's a tyre barrier waiting for you. If you understeer through Eau Rouge, you can probably get away with it. We've already discussed about the fact that there is no gravel trap or through Radillon, so you can run that little bit wide. But if you do try to fight it, to try to keep it in the track limits, whether that be to try to avoid a third track limits and a drive-through penalty, then that's when things can go very wrong and you can find yourself in the wall quite quickly.
Things are looking good though for Mugen Sim Racing. I will say that right now. Their drivers, 3 of them at the moment, very close to each other. In fact, a tenth of a second separates 3 of their drivers. Quite remarkable when it comes to that sort of thing. Is one of them, the third place driver in that one, Christopher Kianek, gets a little bit out of shape going through Bruxelles and decides to head back to the pit lane. But that's going to be encouraging for Mugen, the fact that 3 of their drivers are within a tenth of a second of each other.
Imagine you're the team owner right now. Who do you put out for qualifying?
Well, I'm glad that I'm not a team owner.
Oh, never mind. David Kolaksai just went 1.5 seconds quicker. It's all good. He can go in the car for qualifying.
As it stands, yes, he can go in the car for qualifying. But Kianek is now making his way back onto the pit lane and making his way out of the pit lane now. And as we've already mentioned, Yusuf, it's a long, long pit lane. We talk about long pit lanes, one example being Monza, because when you get there, it's it's a long time you're on the limiter for in the grand scheme of things, because you're next to a part of the track that's 210, 220, possibly even pushing 230 kilometers per hour when you're stuck in the pit lane doing 60. But when you come to Spa-Francorchamps, that is bumped up majorly. It's a narrow pit lane. You're on the speed limiter for a long time, and it can really cost you a lot of time, especially if you get a drive-through penalty. That's going to be something the teams will be wanting to avoid, and this may be a race that could be decided on how many times you cross the white line on the outside of the circuit.
Absolutely, and I know we both commentate on F1, and I always seem to remember the times, or the time lost, the delta time for pit stops on the F1 game, and I always remember Silverstone being absurdly high just because of how slow the pit limit is. It's, I think, about 10 kilometers an hour slower than pretty much any other circuit, so that's another thing to bear in mind. I'm not quite sure how slow it is here at Spa, but the length just makes up for it entirely. I think there were some rumours as well about 30-second stop-and-go penalties just being turned into drive-through penalties because of how much time you lose regardless.
Yeah, that is the way it is, because a drive-through penalty, you are just going to lose so much time here. And if that's the case, then you're now looking at potentially things that would be drive-throughs, maybe being time penalties added on at pit stops, for example. So, you're looking at a track here that has such a long pit lane and such a long time on the speed limiter. I see we're seeing Berenguer heading down the pit lane now on the speed limiter, and this is coming past the GT start line, heading down towards Eau Rouge now. It's just such a long time you're on that limiter for. It goes on forever.
Absolutely, and the lap times have been dropping down steadily with each passing a lap. We've now had a 58.7 for Liam Rance in the DPI car, and we are riding on board with Alexander Zakharov in the 166 GT3 car, the Porsche. I'm pretty sure, actually no, he's in Unison Racing. What am I talking about? 166, that is the ID Sim Sport car. I'm pretty sure that's a Porsche, as he makes his way through the bus stop chicane to most likely improve on his lap. He was able to do a 2:16.7, that is his current best time, and this time round across the line at 2:17.0, so just missing out in the dying stages of practice.
Yeah, still a little bit of time on the board though to get some lap times in. I mean, we've got roughly 3 minutes left of this session and of this broadcast, of course, as we draw it to a close. But it's looking pretty good for qualifying tomorrow, as I predicted, Yusuf, with the rain staying away. This is where we're seeing our qualifying sims come in and seeing how fast you can go. And one thing is that it might be a 7 kilometre long track and 4 metres. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. 4 metres additional is very crucial, very critical.
Over 24 hours, those 4 meters, they add up.
They do add up. They add up majorly. But even around a 7 kilometre track, you're still going to find traffic at the unideal parts of the circuit that you've just got to be wary of.
And this is something that we have spoken about when we arrive at every single race for an endurance championship. What is it like to get past back markers, as we see a huge moment on the rear end through the commentators at corner for Alexander Zakharov? But Spa is one of those tracks, we've talked about narrow tracks like Zandvoort. Zolder would be another one that is incredibly narrow. And if you catch someone right here heading down into the Fanius chicane, after the Fanius chicane you've then got a short run down into Campus in Stavlo, not a huge opportunity to overtake. And it's the same if you catch someone through Malmedy, and then, or I should just say, into the what's that chicane called? I always forget the chicane at the end of the Kemmel Straight.
Les
Combes, yes. If you get someone into Les Combes, chances are you could be stuck behind them all the way down from Les Combes down into the no-name corner or commentator's corner.
Absolutely, and we'll have to wait and see how that all pans out when we get into qualifying tomorrow, which we're slowly coming towards the end of our broadcast here. And do you know what? That has absolutely flown by. I don't know about you, Yusuf.
Yeah. It has. Almost would think we're commentating over an aircraft race with how fast the cars are going. I know there have been times, haven't there, in the past where a car, I want to say a DTM car, but it might have been an endurance car, literally took off on the straight because it lost the front end downforce at some point, maybe going over some undulation, and the car literally went up into the air. It was very scary, but also rather spectacular at the same time.
Yes, I believe that was at Le Mans. I failed to remember the year, possibly late 90s, but that was the Mercedes CLK AMG. I'm pretty sure that was the one that, they, as you rightfully said, it lost the front end, so it got a little bit airborne. And of course, once air gets underneath that car, the opposite happened. So where it's pushing the air down, it obviously couldn't push the air down anymore, so the car lifted the nose up, and so the car actually went backwards and into the trees on the left hand side of the track. Luckily the driver was okay, but I know exactly what you're alluding to for that one, and just shows you how far we've come in sort of aerodynamics when the Ford GT all the way back in the late 60s was starting to lift off of the ground. I believe in 1967, as Liam Rance in the satellite racing hypercar gets all out of shape going through campus and finds an argument with the wall and loses.
Not a pretty sight for him, and it's just rather easy for it to happen. You just carry that little bit too much speed, and let's just see on the replay. So what's the entry looking like? I think the entry's decent, but you can just see mid-corner, the car's already going, he gets onto the gravel, and that's the point where if you find yourself in a situation where you're losing the car a little bit, you've got two options. One's to brave it out, one's to tough it out, saying, I can catch this, and the other one's saying, okay, I'm going to lift out of this. Liam Rance chose the form where he tried to be aggressive, and he got punished for it.
He did indeed, and that's a shame. But yeah, as you saw there, the car just at one point just stopped responding. It was just not behaving anymore, and not behaving in the way that Liam Rance thought it would, and so it's ended up unfortunately with that car into the wall. But there's Henrik Hoyer in the 404 Glam Racing car in the top of the GT3 class, heading into these closing stages of the practice session.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like it's a lot quieter out on circuit as cars heading on into the pits. Maybe calling it an early night. There's no rush hour traffic, as I just see Christopher Kianik completely losing the rear through campus. Almost had the same incident as Liam Rance, but instead the back end just completely swapped ends on him midway through the corner, rather than him trying to let it out a bit more to correct it.
Yeah, just seeing that replay now as he made his way up towards campus, then turned the car in, and yeah, you're absolutely right. The back end lights up on the exit on the curb, and just one wheel into the gravel trap. But yeah, got away with that one. But just a little bit of a stark reminder that the cars can bite back if you push them a little bit too much.
And as we said, you've got two options. Liam Rance, he took the second option at the start. He thought, okay, you know what, I can feel that this back end is stepping out, so I'm going to steer into it a bit, open up the steering. But then you find yourself on the gravel trap, you keep the foot in, you try to brave it out, it can go wrong. And then Christopher Kianik, he thought, I'm going to keep it steered in despite the back end coming out. I think, you have faith in the car. At the end of the day, car's your best friend when you're out on circuit. But this time, the car just couldn't quite handle the amount of lateral load on the tyres, and it spins round. But thankfully for him, he doesn't crash on into a barrier, and it's a learning experience at the end of the day. It's still practice. Qualifying next, again, still a bit of a learning experience, and then the race, which is when no mistakes can be made.
No more mistakes can be made, and after tonight, of course, that escape button doesn't work anymore. It's been used luxuriously by these drivers, but not from now, so they'll have to be very careful about that one. But it's been a very intriguing practice session. We've seen the Mugen Sim Racing team, their drivers as well, being incredibly close, not only in a pack, but they've also been within tenths of a second of each other, which has been really interesting. And as you say, does anybody guess who gets into the car for tomorrow's qualifying session?
It's going to be a nightmare decision for them to make. I think they're out of the session now, and as you mentioned, the drivers having fun pressing that escape button as much as they can. Almost like boxers after a boxing match. They just absolutely stuff their face with all kinds of junk food, and they gain a ridiculous amount of weight. So they love life for like a period of a few weeks, and then it's a hard grind again for their next match. And that's what these drivers are doing as well at the moment, using up as much resources as they can. It's almost the same as using up flashbacks when you're practicing on an F1 game.
Yeah, that's why I just set it to unlimited. I don't have to worry about limits and flashbacks. Absolutely not. But unfortunately, I think we're coming to the end of our time on the broadcast, Yusuf. So unfortunately, we're being told to wrap it up.
Yeah, we are. So, to all of our viewers, we hope you have enjoyed the show so far. We'll have plenty more action over the weekend because we've got qualifying tomorrow. Could you believe it? You almost would have thought it's not going to happen. But 7 p.m. tomorrow on Friday evening. That's 7 p.m. European time, 6 p.m. if you're like myself and Kieran, based in the UK. We'll have 2 2-hour qualifying sessions coming your way. And then we have the race Saturday afternoon, 24 hours of Spa action, and that will be starting at 1 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. Central European time. For myself and Kieran, thank you very much for tuning in. Stay fast. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Round 5, the 24 Hours of Spa-Francorchamps is brought to you in partnership with Viper Gaming by Patriot, Leap Gaming, Global Flix, Film Volt, ESTV, and Motorvision.tv.
Racing for Green is here to help you carbon neutralize your racing. By planting new trees, Racing for Green offers to make your racing carbon neutral. We already have the calculations, contacts, infrastructure, deals and solutions ready for you to easily buy carbon neutral laps on any racetrack. It doesn't matter if you are a racing fan, team owner, driver, sponsor or partner. Anyone can buy CO2 neutral laps in the Racing for Green webshop and trade CO2 emissions for New Forest. Racing for Green.
A 1v2 for the tournament. Pressure is on.